Is the world prepared for the Messiah's second coming? The historic event seems to be finally coming to pass with an unstoppable force that will change the course of history. In the middle of the fervor, one subject has long attracted discussion and debate: the building of the Third Temple in Jerusalem. The beginning of the Messianic period appears to be on the horizon as perceptions change and truths are revealed. This developing chapter is closely related to the idea of the Third Temple, a significant building with a lengthy history of construction and destruction. This temple, also known as the Third House of the Sanctum, would eventually be built in Jerusalem to replace Solomon's Temple and the Second Temple. As the First Temple, or the first home of the sanctuary, Solomon's Temple was built under the rule of David's son, Solomon, and finished in 957 BCE. The pinnacle of King Solomon's rule was Solomon's Temple. The Great Temple was intended to serve as a permanent resting place for the Ark of the Covenant, which held the Ten Commandments, and was something that King David, the father of Solomon, reportedly planned to construct a generation earlier. King David was forbidden from doing so by a divine mandate that read, "You will not build a house for my name." God said, "For you are a man of battles and have shed blood." Solomon nevertheless constructed the temple, which had an interior roof that measured 180 feet long by 90 feet broad and 50 feet high. According to historical accounts, King Solomon's temple reached a height of 120 cubits at its tallest point. During the construction of the First Temple, Solomon made no compromises on the cost of the structure. King HIRAM of TYRE was commissioned to provide vast quantities of cedar wood. He ordered that the foundation of the building be constructed using massive blocks of the finest stone, which were mined. He compelled his staff to work in shifts that could often extend a month at a time in order to finish this enormous undertaking. 3,300 officials in total were chosen to oversee the temple's construction. Solomon dedicated the temple with prayer and sacrifice after many years of construction. Even non-Jews were invited to attend and pray with the words, "Thus all the peoples of the earth will know your name and revere you as does your people Israel." Solomon pleaded with God to pay special attention to their pleas. Additionally, they will realize that this house I erected bears your name. The initial temple soon doubled as a hub for Israelites to congregate, in addition to being a place of worship. Jews were banished in 587 BCE, which was viewed as the fulfillment of prophecy as the Bible had foretold, and the First Temple met its end. Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon, who took the temple's wealth out of it in 604 and 597 BCE and destroyed the structure in 587 to 586 BCE, caused the temple to suffer. Jewish people's faith in the Bible was enhanced by this catastrophe and the expulsion of Jews to Babylonia. A fulfillment of prophecy was also seen in this Jewish exile. A very significant biblical prophet named Jeremiah berated his fellow Israelites for not fully trusting in God and for worshiping other gods. He also stated that, although they were being punished by being exiled to Babylon, God would still call them home to Judea in 70 years. And 70 years after the Purim story, under the leadership of the prophets Ezra and Nehemiah, a large number of Jews returned to Israel, fulfilling another prophecy of the Second Temple. The Second Temple was erected on the same site once the Jews had returned, and sacrifices to God were once more performed there. Following this, the temple and the nearby mountain saw significant changes as a result of Herod, the Roman-appointed ruler of Judea during the 1st century BCE. Herod also enlarged and expanded the temple. The Romans, however, destroyed the Second Temple in 70 CE when the Great Revolt was unsuccessful, sharing the same fate as the First Temple. Jews place a great deal of importance on the Third Temple because of how the destruction of the First and Second Temples is depicted in the Holy Bible. The Muslims eventually acquired control of Jerusalem when the Second Jewish Temple was destroyed over a period of centuries, and on the Temple Mount, the location of the two Jewish temples, they erected two mosques. As a result, Mount MORIAH in the ancient Bible became Jerusalem's most recognizable scenery. It is referred to as the Temple Mount by Jews and the noble sanctuary by Muslims. Muslims consider this location to be the third holiest in Islam after Mecca and Medina. The entire complex, which includes the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, also known as the Qibli Mosque and constructed in the 8th century AD, is referred to as Al-Aqsa. And this is where the variations appear. The temple cannot be restored anytime soon because destroying these mosques will ignite a global jihad against Israel, which is prohibited by Muslim law. Jews are enraged by this reality, but since it's virtually impossible, why do Jews continually call for the building of the third temple? Jewish and Christian scriptures place a high priority on rebuilding the temple, which is the third temple in Jerusalem. According to Mati and Bari, an associate professor of religion at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, both religions describe a distinct beginning for mankind in the book of Ezekiel, indicating that there must also be a distinct end, which the third temple represents. Rebuilding this temple is a concept connected to Messianic beliefs. Jewish tradition holds that when the end times draw near, God will send the Jews home again. The third temple is expected to come down from heaven onto the Temple Mount in Jerusalem as one of a sequence of miracles that God would execute, according to another widely held belief. The third temple has a special place in the hearts of Jews, particularly Orthodox Jews, because of this longing for home. While there is dispute among Orthodox Jews as to how the third temple should be rebuilt, they do think that it should be rebuilt and that animal sacrifices should resume. Orthodox academics and rabbinic authorities largely agree that it was divine providence for the rebuilding to occur during the time of the Jewish Messiah. However, the Torah scholar and medieval Jewish philosopher Maimonides believed that wherever possible, Jews themselves should construct the temple. Conservative and Orthodox Jews have divergent views on this. Conservative Jews believe in a Messiah and temple rebuilding, but not in sacrificial restoration. As a result, the Jewish Law and Standards Commission of Conservative Judaism modified the prayer. Now, conservative prayer books call for the restoration of the temple, but not for the resumption of sacrifices. For this, the Orthodox study on sacrifice in the daily morning service was replaced with a Talmud passage teaching that sins are atoned for by acts of loving kindness. However, Jews are not the only ones who value the third temple. The third temple is crucial in Christianity as a sign of Jesus' second coming, as described in the book of Revelation, claims Darrell Bach, a senior research professor at Dallas Theological Seminary. Among Christians, there are really only two approaches, he continued. One theory holds that there won't be a physical temple per se, but the more widely accepted one asserts that there will, and when it does, it will be a sign that the coming of Christ is very near. Another compelling reason for the rebuilding of the third temple is rooted in the teachings of the Talmud. According to this ancient text, during the time of King Agrippa, Jerusalem experienced a remarkable influx of millions of visitors and pilgrims from various regions. This historical context highlights the significance of the city as a spiritual hub and a center of pilgrimage. This idea has inspired a new way of thinking about the advantages of possibly recreating the third temple in modern times. According to some recent theories, the restoration of the temple would be able to capitalize on the lucrative spiritual tourist market, which has the potential to revitalize Jerusalem's cultural and economic environment. It supports the mayor of Jerusalem's audacious plan to draw an astounding 10 million visitors a year. Tourists looking to experience the spiritual richness and historical depth of the city might be drawn in by the appeal of a reconstructed third temple because of its great historical and theological relevance. By drawing on the precedent set during the era of King Agrippa, the aspiration to rebuild the third temple not only holds religious and cultural significance, but also carries the potential to fuel tourism-driven growth in the city. This multifaceted approach underscores the complex interplay between tradition, faith, economics, and the overarching ambition to revitalize Jerusalem's global stature as a destination of profound spiritual and historical importance. This will give a huge boost to the economy and benefit local and regional people, many of whom live in poverty. But what efforts have been made till now to rebuild the third temple, and why hasn't it been built? Devout Jews have expressed their deep desire to build a third temple on the Temple Mount since the destruction of the second temple in AD 70. Prayer for this is a formal part of the Jewish tradition of praying to Amitabha 3 times daily. Although the third temple has not been built yet, The concept and aspiration of the Third Temple are sacred in Judaism, especially Orthodox Judaism, and it is expected to be built soon as a place of worship. When Rabbi Moshe Goren, chief rabbi of the Israel Defense Forces, organized a public prayer for the Jews on the Temple Mount, following Israel's occupation of the mountain in August 1967. It was a historic initiative. 50 Jews were taken by Goren to the Temple Mount, where they conducted prayer services in defiance of Muslim guards and Israeli police. Other active members of this movement are the Temple Lab and the Temple Institute. The Temple Lab has created several items for use in the Third Temple, and the Temple Institute has dedicated much effort to recreating the special garments to be worn by the Israelite priests in general and the high priest in particular. However, their efforts seem to face challenges, as the descriptions given in the Holy Bible of this garb are vague, and the information from the Mishnah isn't much help either. A sacrifice by the Temple Institute in 2017, a contentious act that led to some arrests, was made close to the Temple Mount. The Temple Institute has made it clear that they won't back down in the face of debate and criticism. To fulfill the conditions for restarting temple sacrifices, 5 red heifers were flown from Texas to Israel. This requirement stems from Numbers 19:2-10, where Jesus demanded a specific heifer sacrifice, whose ashes would be used to make the purifying water that the priests needed to be cleansed before they could offer sacrifices. But what is the reason that, even after all these preparations, the Third Temple still has not been built? Will it ever be possible to build the Third Temple? And will the Messiah ever return? The most immediate and obvious obstacles in the way of rebuilding the Third Temple are 2 historic Islamic buildings dating back to the 13th century, the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. These structures are said to be built in the exact same place as the Second Temple, and this controversial position of the mosque hinders access to these sites or constructs, cantilever Jewish structures in between, under, beside, or above them. Being such an important place in Islam, if any attempts are made to build structures on the site, it could lead to serious international conflicts. However, it is also worth noting that while the Dome of the Rock is believed to occupy the actual space where the Second Temple once stood, some scholars disagree. They say that the temple might be located just north of the Dome of the Rock, or could have been situated about 200 meters south of the dome. This uncertainty stems from the Bible's vague descriptions of the temple's location. It states, "A place which the Lord your God shall choose to cause his name to dwell there." In these days, it is unanimously accepted that the only site for the Hebrew temple is the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. One reason is that the prophets seem to agree that the Third Temple is to be built in Jerusalem on the site of the first 2 temples. Thus says Ezekiel, and both Isaiah and Micah oddly in the very same words. "And many people shall go and say, Come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. And he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." Because of this misunderstanding, the majority of Orthodox Jewish scholars reject any attempt to construct a temple prior to the advent of the Messiah. The ideal location for its construction is a topic of much debate. For instance, measurements are given in cubits, although there is debate over whether this unit of measurement corresponds to the 1.84 feet that the academic community has agreed upon, or the 1.43 feet that the esteemed historian Asher Salig Kaufman has suggested. No altar could be built without knowing the exact size of a cubit. Another obstacle is that if the temple were to be rebuilt, it would require a massive workforce of priests and Levites who would mainly be responsible for the continuous and large-scale ritual slaughter of animals aimed at appeasing the deity. This practice goes against the beliefs of conservative Jews. Additionally, the likelihood of a peaceful temple construction is diminished because disputes between Jews and Muslims over the Temple Mount have escalated into one of the main flashpoints of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So, will there actually be a third temple? Many individuals think that the world is about to end and that Jesus Christ's second coming is already taking place. The largest indication of this is Jews going back to Israel. According to Jeremiah chapter 29, And I will be found by you, says the Lord, and I will bring your captivity home and gather you from all the nations and from all the places where I have driven you, says the Lord, and I will return you to the place whence I exiled you. Therefore, it is obvious that the Messiah is on the way, whether the temple is built by Jews or rises from the ground.